Thank you for choosing to watch this documentary. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. The year was 1962. The world held its breath. The United States and the Soviet Union locked in a chilling embrace, a nuclear standoff, a game of chess played with the lives of millions. This was the Cold War, an era where fear was a constant companion, where every decision carried the weight of potential annihilation. The world was a powder keg, and the fuse was lit. The post-World War II era had given birth to this terrifying new reality. Two superpowers, ideologically opposed, armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. Each side eyed the other with suspicion. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. Propaganda machines churned on both sides, painting the enemy as monsters, fueling the flames of fear and distrust. The world watched, holding its breath, waiting for the moment the hammer might fall. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, hung over the world, a terrifying promise. Any nuclear attack would be met with devastating retaliation. It was a terrifying game of chicken, each side hoping the other would blink first, but the stakes were unimaginably high. One wrong move, one miscalculation, could spell the end of civilization as we knew it. In this pressure cooker of paranoia, mistakes were made. Close calls happened with alarming regularity, near misses that could have rewritten history in the most horrific ways. One such event, in the fall of 1983, would bring the world to the brink, a single, terrifying event that exposed the fragility of peace and the very real possibility of global nuclear war. In the early 1980s, the Cold War was entering a new, even more dangerous phase. Ronald Reagan, a staunch anti-communist, took the helm in the United States. He saw the Soviet Union as an evil empire, a direct threat to the American way of life. His rhetoric was fiery, his policies confrontational. He ramped up military spending, initiated the Strategic Defense Initiative (SDI), nicknamed Star Wars by a skeptical public. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union was also undergoing a transition. Leonid Brezhnev, the aging General Secretary of the Communist Party, died in 1982. He was succeeded by Yuri Andropov, a former KGB chief. Andropov was a hardened Cold Warrior, suspicious of the West, convinced that the United States was seeking military superiority, determined to match them threat for threat. In this climate of fear and suspicion, a top-secret KGB operation, codenamed Ryan, was put into motion. Ryan stood for Raketno-Yadernnoye Napadenie, Russian for nuclear missile attack. Its objective to gather intelligence on any potential Western plans for a nuclear first strike against the Soviet Union. Western intelligence agencies got wind of Operation Ryan. This fueled their worst fears. The Soviets, they believed, were preparing for a preemptive strike. They were convinced that Moscow, under Andropov, was on a hair-trigger alert, ready to unleash its nuclear arsenal at the slightest provocation. The West was on edge. Every blip on a radar screen, every coded message, scrutinized for signs of impending doom. Adding fuel to the fire were a series of large-scale military exercises conducted by both NATO and the Warsaw Pact. These exercises, designed to simulate real-world scenarios, involved thousands of troops, tanks, aircraft, and warships. While intended to be a show of force, they only served to heighten tensions further. One such exercise, Able Archer 83, conducted by NATO in November 1983, would prove to be a particularly dangerous escalation. Able Archer simulated a coordinated nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. It involved realistic scenarios, high-level communications traffic, and the movement of nuclear weapons components. To the Soviets, already on high alert due to Operation Ryan, Able Archer looked eerily like the real thing. The stage was set for a catastrophic miscalculation. The world, oblivious to the danger, went about its business, unaware that the fate of humanity hung precariously in the balance. The date was September 26, 1983. A chill settled over the Serpukhov 15 bunker, a top-secret Soviet early warning facility south of Moscow. Inside, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a seasoned officer with the Soviet Air Defense Forces, began his shift. The atmosphere was tense. The information from Operation Ryan had filtered down. An American attack, they were told, was a very real possibility. Petrov sat before a flickering screen, monitoring the OCO system, the Soviet Union's early warning satellite network. The system, though advanced for its time, was still new, untested. Its reliability was a subject of debate even among those who manned it, but it was all they had. The fate of the Soviet Union, perhaps the entire world, rested on its accuracy. Suddenly, an alarm shrieked through the bunker, piercing the tense silence. Petrov's eyes darted to the screen. His blood ran cold. The system was reporting a launch. A single missile launched from the United States, heading straight for Soviet territory. Then another alarm, another launch, and another. The screen flashed ominously, 5 US missiles in total, arcing across the digital map. Panic seized the bunker. This was it, the moment they had all feared. The room erupted in a cacophony of shouting, questions fired back and forth in panicked Russian. Petrov's training kicked in. He fought back the wave of adrenaline coursing through him. His mind raced, trying to process the information, to make sense of the unthinkable. He had to act. But one wrong move could trigger a retaliatory strike, unleashing a nuclear holocaust. Protocol was clear. In the event of a confirmed nuclear attack, Petrov was to immediately report the incident up the chain of command. The Soviet leadership, in turn, had mere minutes to decide whether to retaliate. The fate of the world rested on Petrov's next decision, but something didn't feel right. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The attack, as reported by the OCO system, was limited, only 5 missiles, a strange tactic for a first strike. A full-scale nuclear assault by the United States, Petrov reasoned, would involve hundreds of missiles, not just a handful. Could this be a malfunction, a false alarm? His gut told him something was wrong. But could he trust his intuition over the sophisticated technology screaming at him? Time seemed to stand still as Petrov wrestled with the impossible decision. The weight of the world, quite literally, pressed down on him. Report the attack, and risk triggering a global nuclear war. Dismiss it as a malfunction, and gamble with the lives of millions. The seconds ticked by, an eternity in that suffocating bunker. Petrov took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to make a choice. He looked at the faces of the men around him. Fear and confusion etched on their faces. They were looking to him for guidance, for salvation. In that moment, Petrov made a decision that defied logic, that defied protocol, that defied everything he had been trained to do. He chose to trust his gut. He chose to believe that this was a false alarm. He chose to save the world. Petrov picked up the phone, the line crackling with static. He hesitated for a moment, his hand trembling slightly. This was it. This was the point of no return. He took a deep breath, his voice a strained whisper as he spoke into the receiver. System malfunction. No launch detected. A wave of silence washed over the bunker, thick and heavy. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate. The men in the room exchanged bewildered glances, relief gradually replacing the fear that had gripped them only moments before. Petrov sat back in his chair, his heart still pounding against his ribs. He had made his decision. Now all he could do was wait. Wait and pray that he had made the right call. In Moscow, deep within the bowels of the Kremlin, the phone on General Yuri Votintsev's desk buzzed to life. Votintsev, a high-ranking officer in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, was a hardened military man. He had served his country faithfully for decades, rising through the ranks during some of the most turbulent years of the Cold War. He picked up the phone, his gruff voice echoing in the silence of his dimly lit office. General Votintsov. The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. It was one of his subordinates at the Serpukhov 15 bunker, reporting an incident of the highest importance. 5 American missiles, the voice informed him, had been detected by the OCO system. They were inbound, targeting Soviet territory. Votintsev's blood ran cold. This was it, the moment he had dreaded for years. The Americans had launched a first strike. Votintsov's mind raced. He had mere minutes to confirm the report and alert the Soviet leadership. He immediately contacted the command center of the Soviet Strategic Rocket Forces, his voice betraying the urgency of the situation. "Confirm report from Serpukhov 15. Do we have confirmation from ground radar?" The response was immediate, but not what he expected. "Negative, Comrade General. Our ground radar shows no signs of a launch." Votintsev's brow furrowed. This didn't make sense. The Oko system was the most advanced early warning system in the world. It was designed to be infallible. And yet the ground radar, a more traditional and arguably less reliable system, showed nothing. For what felt like an eternity, Votintsev paced his office, the phone still clutched in his hand, the weight of his decision pressed down on him. If he relayed the unconfirmed report, he risked triggering a retaliatory strike, unleashing a nuclear holocaust that would consume the world. But if he hesitated, if he waited for confirmation that might never come, he risked allowing a devastating attack to go unanswered. As the minutes ticked by, Votintsov struggled to regain his composure. He needed more information. He needed to understand why the ground radar wasn't corroborating the Oko system's report. He needed to make sense of the chaos that threatened to engulf the world. The fate of humanity, quite literally, hung in the balance. The silence from the other end of the line was deafening. Petrov could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. He knew Votintsov, knew the general's reputation for decisiveness, for unwavering loyalty to the motherland. He imagined the scene in the Kremlin, the frantic scramble to make sense of the conflicting reports, the pressure to retaliate before it was too late. Every fibre of Petrov's being screamed at him to recant, to tell Votintsov that he'd made a mistake, that the system was indeed operational. He could practically feel the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders, the responsibility threatening to crush him. But deep down, a persistent voice whispered that something was wrong. The limited number of missiles, the lack of corroborating evidence, it all felt off. He had to buy some time, for everyone's sake. Votintsev's gut churned with unease. Something about the report from Serpukhov 15 didn't sit right. Years of experience in the heart of Soviet military intelligence had taught him to trust his instincts. The lack of confirmation from ground-based radar was troubling. And the reported scale of the attack, a mere 5 missiles, seemed illogical. Why would the Americans initiate a first strike with such a limited attack? He pressed for further information, demanding to know why the ground radar wasn't picking up the incoming missiles. The technicians at Serpukhov 15 had no explanation, their voices tight with fear and confusion. Votintsov could hear the panic in their voices, the echo of his own racing heartbeat in their frantic reports. As dawn broke over Moscow, casting a pale light through the windows of the Kremlin, General Votintsov made his decision. He would not relay the unconfirmed report to his superiors. He would not be the one to trigger Armageddon. Instead, he issued a flurry of orders. Reconnaissance flights were scrambled to search for any signs of a launch. Satellite imagery was meticulously analyzed. Hours ticked by, each one an eternity. The world held its breath, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind closed doors. Finally, after what felt like an age, the confirmation came. The Oko system had malfunctioned. There had been no launch, no missiles, no attack. The tension that had gripped the Kremlin, the world, for those agonizing hours, finally broke. A collective sigh of relief swept across continents, though no one outside a select few knew just how close humanity had come to the brink. The events of September 26th, 1983 remained shrouded in secrecy for years, a silent testament to the terrifying reality of the Cold War, a world on a knife's edge where one man's decision, one man's gut feeling, prevented a global catastrophe. Stanislav Petrov, a name largely unknown to the world, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, human courage and human intuition can prevail. The Cold War is over, the Soviet Union a distant memory, but the lessons of that era remain as relevant as ever. In a world still grappling with the threat of nuclear proliferation, where tensions flare and political posturing often trumps reason. The story of Stanislav Petrov serves as a stark reminder, a reminder of the fragility of peace, of the ever-present danger of miscalculation, of the human element at the heart of global conflict. We are all, in a sense, sitting in that bunker with Petrov, staring at the blinking screens of our own making. May we all be so fortunate to have a Petrov among us when the alarms sound again. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more informative documentaries. Let us continue to explore the wonders and challenges of our world together.